Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Start Something podcast, where we take you behind the scenes on the founder journey, breaking down what it takes and how it can change your life. I'm Shruti.
And I'm Bailey, and in this episode, we are going to be talking about building emotional resilience. We've already talked about rejection and how to handle it, how to go through it over and over again, but in this episode, we want to talk about how to handle the rejection and build that emotional resilience for something really specific, like getting rejected from a sales conversation, having someone say they don't like your product, or doing a really bad job in a pitch or something like that, and needing to just handle it and not let it take you down. So that's what we're gonna talk about in this episode. I'd love to start off just by handing it over to you because this episode was your idea. I'm totally on board, but
yes.
Tell me a little bit about how you see emotional resilience in your life.
Yeah, for me, any little conversation that I have with anyone, you were passing by me on the street and you said, hey, your shirt looked kind of gross, for example, even a little comment like that, I used to take very personally, right? And it really used to impact my self-esteem, how I felt about myself, and honestly, my emotional state. That silly little comment might have ruined my day, right? And so when you translate that to the founder journey, that becomes very, very difficult because people are rejecting you left, right, center, right? Your customers are telling you, hey, I hate this product, or you might get rejected in a sales pitch, or you might get rejected in a VC pitch, right? You're constantly trying to sell yourself and who you are and what you believe in. And so that's where the topic of building emotional resilience came from, because I think a lot of people question whether they should be a founder or not just because of this topic, but it's not spoken about.
Totally. Yeah, I remember one time giving a really bad pitch and feeling super disappointed in myself. And this is where I first started to recognize how important it was to intentionally build emotional resilience. And it's because I gave this really bad pitch and I was sharing it with a mentor, and afterwards I was processing, right? We talked about the personal board of advisors. So I'm telling my mentor, oh my gosh, I feel so embarrassed. I feel so bad. I didn't nail this pitch the way that I wanted to. And it's because I was I'd just been impacted by another wildfire. And so I went into this pitch and all I did was talk about the problem. And of course our solution, but I didn't talk about any of the other things an investor wants to hear. I wasn't talking about the business. I wasn't talking about the market.
Yeah.
Literally the reason you go in and give a pitch, I wasn't addressing any of that. I was so absorbed with this other thing that I forgot, check the boxes of what a pitch is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I felt so bad, and I really wasn't feeling emotionally resilient at that time. And my mentor told me something that I don't think I'll ever forget. And in that moment, he said, Bailey, I can't believe you don't see what the problem is. And I was like, what? You know what the problem is? Tell me
everything.
Tell me the solution, I'll fix it. What is it? And he said, yeah, the problem and the reason you're so worked up about this pitch is because you're being self-absorbed. And I was like, what?
Self-absorbed? Wow, you're the least self-absorbed person to anyone who knows you personally. No, I don't think so.
I appreciate that. But in that moment, I think I was just in the exact right place to hear that. And when you have a mentor who cares about you, it's easier to take honest, candid, challenging feedback. And in that moment, I was ready for the feedback. And what I realized is, one, he was right. What I was doing is I was making the pitch and my performance and what they thought about me and what they thought about my pitch, I was making it all about me. It was, how do they perceive me? How do I look? Do I look unprepared? Did I do a good job? Did I represent the company effectively? And what my mentor shared with me is he said, Bailey, it's not about you. It's about the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you go in there and you're focused on sharing the work, then it doesn't need to be about you. And even if they pass on your business, that's okay, because your job is just to keep showing up and keep doing the work. And so in that moment, what I understood is, for me, emotional resilience is about thinking of myself separately from the work that I'm doing, and not making everyone's feedback about my product, about my pitch, about literally anything about my company,
Yeah.
not making everything about me. And instead asking myself every day, okay, how can I show up and focus on doing the best work that I can? Obviously, it's still hard to get rejected, and that's why we made an episode talking about that. But I think that's been the most important tool for me when it comes to building emotional resilience.
Yeah.
And it's why I actually got the tattoos that I have.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I got these as a reminder that my job on this planet is to focus on doing good works on behalf of whatever dropped me here. And I know that when I tend to feel a lot of anxiety or imposter syndrome or self-doubt, it's because I'm making my life and my work about this part of me. Like I'm making it about myself.
Yeah.
As opposed to when I feel peace and I feel really connected and aligned with the work that I'm doing, it's because I'm making it about the work and saying, how can I do better work every day, as opposed to what do people think about me?
Yeah. I related a lot to the takeaways from your experience. I went through actually quite a similar experience. So back when I started Stitchology, I'd spent a couple months now talking to over 300 women, right, across the US, and I was getting ready to launch my first version of Stitchology. And after talking to 300 people, I was like, okay, great. At the minimum, on day 0 of launch, I'm going to get at least 300 sales. All these women were doing 1-hour phone calls. I was getting super invested. I was checking in on them. They were asking me when's the launch. They were looking at my prototypes, giving me positive feedback. Finally comes launch day, right? And I had spent all this time building out this V1 of the product, and I got $0 in sales. It's really easy for me to talk about the 6 failures a couple years later, but in the moment, I was really down, right? And that was my first hit at, oh my God, were these people lying to me? Like I surveyed 200 people, I talked to 300 people. That was the first question I asked myself. The second question I asked was, oh my God, do they hate me? Did I do something wrong? What's going on, right? And it took me time to like actually reflect on that experience, take a step back and recognize and ask myself, okay, fundamentally, I don't think 300 people can't be lying to me. So fundamentally, that might not be the issue. But also, why would anyone hate me, right? Like people are invested in this experience. And it took me understanding that there are no South Asian events for women to make orders for South Asian clothing because it was COVID. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge wake-up call in my first experience. And I also, in the same time, came across Whitney Hurd. I learned so much about her. For those of you who don't know, she's the founder and CEO of Bumble. And I was like, wow, this lady is inspiring. And I came across one of her quotes, and to summarize what she said, it's along the lines of having a dream and running through fire and ice till you get there. Mm-hmm. And I've stuck that on my wall, and I look at that all the time, and it's a reminder of things are going to go wrong, and you have to accept that. You have to walk into this founder journey knowing that you are going to have lows. The question is, what are you going to do about it, right? Are you going to make it about yourself? Mm-hmm. Or are you going to figure out how you can actually solve the problem? And I think it takes a skill set. Honestly, part of that founder journey was me strengthening that particular skill set for myself.
Yeah, that's so important. And I loved what you said at the end in terms of, am I going to let this take me down, or am I going to really lean in? And I feel like there's this idea that I just heard, and it's about self-care, obviously, my favorite topic. And I feel like the phrasing and the way this self-care idea was shared to me recently just totally hit me. And the phrase was about, there's a difference between self-care, like performing self-care, and being self-caring. And it hit me so hard recently, and what I loved about it is I feel like so often when we do something that doesn't live up to our own standards, or when something doesn't perform at the level that we hope our product launch is going to take off, we hope that people are going to love our pitch, we hope that people are going to buy our product, but sometimes things don't rise to the level of those expectations. And in those moments, we only have one of two options. We can either really criticize ourselves and look at all of the things that we did wrong, or we can show up for ourselves and be self-caring in the process, while simultaneously asking, okay, how can I reach the levels that I want to get to, but not from a place of, oh, you're terrible, like you messed this up, like how could you not see this coming? Instead, there's such a big difference between saying, okay, I'm not where I want to be, but I'm proud of myself for where I am right now. And I feel like so many founders wait until they achieve this big goal before they ever start to feel proud of themselves or care for themselves. And this really matters because if your experience is 5 years of self-loathing, then you're not going to look back on the experience, no matter how good the result might be, you're not going to look back on the experience and feel like, wow, that was really great. And by the end of it, you're going to be so emotionally exhausted. And I feel like one of the most important things that we can learn as founders is to actually care for ourselves in the experience and learn to develop pride in what we've accomplished and to look back and see, wow, we've actually come so far. And that doesn't mean that we've reached the destination of where we want to go, but that also doesn't mean that I can't be proud of myself in the process. And I think that a big part of emotional resilience is developing that sense of self-care, not just taking bubble baths and doing face masks, but giving ourselves the emotional care that we need and learning to speak to ourselves in a way that we would speak to other people.
No, I think you hit it on the nail, and I'm just thinking about the time here, so I want to transition to some takeaways of how you can build emotional resilience. I'll kick it off and I'll let you add to it.
Go for it.
I think one thing that is key is when you do a quarterly check-in with your business, right? That's a very standard practice that we do. Also do a quarterly emotional check-in, right? What are all the things that I've learned this best from you writing lists down, but just what are all the things that went well this quarter? What are all the things you're proud of? It might be as simple as I woke up and I exercised every single day. That's a huge accomplishment.
That is a huge accomplishment.
All the way to I actually ate 3 meals a day. You know, there's so many crazy lifestyles that founders live, and it's the little things that really matter that you can reflect on and just see your tiny, tiny little bits of growth. And then even a section on like where you can improve upon for the next quarter. And I think that is a good framework for you to watch your growth over time and see how you're building some of that emotional resilience.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I feel like when you're doing these kinds of quarterly check-ins, and whether it's every quarter, whether it's once a month, as long as it's not saving it for like New Year's Eve every year, the goal is let's actually develop this kind of care and this process of creating emotional resilience. Let's turn it into a habit and a pattern that we invest in, as opposed to something that we do once a year on New Year's Eve. And so I think that there's this idea that we have to feel bad about ourselves in order to change. And what I think is maybe one of the most important things I have learned in my 6 years as a founder is actually the best, most high quality change often comes from a place of love and asking, you know, what can I do to get to the next level and how can I appreciate what I've done so far? And so the tool that I would share is starting to pay attention to the story that you have going on in your mind, and ideally looking for regular opportunities to be intentional about what that story looks like and intentionally shaping that story for good. And so you know that one of my favorite practices of all time is journaling. But I don't actually journal about what happened to me that day or like what I did that day.
You don't?
I don't.
It's not a diary?
No, it's not a diary. No, I tend to go to my journal to ask questions, to remind myself of like positive things, to even say like this is a little bit embarrassing, but if you read my journal, you would see on a bunch of different days, I write to myself, you got this. You got this. And I'll write about a challenge that I'm going through. And then at the end, there's this part of me that shows up when I journal that's like, you got this, you love challenges, keep going. And having those types of quarterly or monthly or even daily practices that remind you you're doing a good job. That's the kind of thing that gives you the emotional stamina that you need to keep going, because very few people's businesses are like, okay, 12 months later, like, boom, we're done. Oftentimes these companies will last for many years. And so developing that emotional runway is so important. And I think one of the best ways you can do that is give yourself that time every day.
Yeah.
Because when you start looking for things to be grateful for about how you showed up, you'll be able to find them and you'll be able to do more of them.
You ended perfectly.
Oh, thank you. I'll write that down in my journal tonight.
You got this.
Yeah.
All right, so if there's one takeaway that you walk away from, it's that you got this.
You got this. You got this. You got this. I got this.
Yeah. Thanks for another awesome episode, everyone. See you next time.
We got this.
We got this.
Okay.